but I don't think I'll give the whole show to him though.
Well, we need to give some context to it, and ultimately, well, let's just start. And then we can talk about it here in a bit.
Are we recording and streaming and all that?
I wouldn't say let's start if we weren't.
Fair enough. In that case, I'm Jack.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Lauren.
And we are Glib Shark. We are recording this on October 25th, 2016, the birthday of Richard Lewis from Anything But Love. Not really. But first, as always, we have the lovely, the talented, the amazing Oboe Crazy here to do a little something that we call This Week in Geek. How are you, Lauren?
I'm pretty darn good. We're getting into the holiday season. I'm lining up my gigs. I already have 2 Messiahs and a Nutcracker lined up for November and December. So, life is good. What got lined up that none of us were happy about was a DDoS attack. So if you were online on Friday, you probably encountered errors with some of your favorite websites. Say you wanted to go buy something on Amazon, or listen to some music on Spotify, or go to Twitter or CNN, or pay for something with PayPal, or go to Reddit. You couldn't do any of that. There was a giant DDoS attack on any of DIN's domain name servers. It was large enough to take down some of these huge sites that are kind of used to this thing. The attack utilized a botnet made up of Internet of Things devices. So it's like smart TVs, DVRs, internet-connected cameras, not actual computers, but things that have computer-like qualities that are connected to the internet that really bad people can use to attack sites. So for most of Friday, thanks to this attack, you couldn't access these fun things on the internet. Some information has come out, some has not. The big question is that nobody really has any solid answers yet on who did it. There were rumblings online the attack might have been a state-sponsored one, but an unnamed intelligence official told NBC they've ruled that out, saying it was, quote, classic case of internet vandalism, end quote. NBC News goes on to report that a senior U.S. official told NBC News the current assessment is that this is internet vandalism. The official said it does not appear at this point to be any kind of directed attack. They don't know how long it will take to say who's responsible. And they didn't offer any proof to bolster their claims. We basically just got to take their word for it. The attack was done by basically, as most DDoS attacks are, they're launched on these internet-enabled devices with the Miria botnet. Miria is malware. It recently became open source, allowing anyone to build their own botnet army, because that's a good idea. Yeah. And a DDoS attack, for those of you who don't understand, the denial of service attack. Basically, hey, say if you're a fan of the Rooster Teeth website and you try to access the Rooster Teeth site when Ruby went online, you might, the latest episode, you might have noticed that the whole site had been taken down. It wasn't because of an attack. It was because there were so many people trying to log on all at the same time. It basically clogged up the servers. A DDoS attack does that, except it does it with fake stuff. And it does it to specifically make a site go down instead of, the red versus blue way, which is just, hey, we're fans and we break stuff. The interesting thing about this whole attack is that some of the devices used came from one specific Chinese manufacturer that creates parts for internet-connected webcams. And the company, which I'm not going to try to pronounce because I'll fail miserably, said it would recall the devices utilized in the attack to send out security patches. They're saying that this is just a coincidence, and they weren't the only devices used in the attack, but it seems like a variety of the devices used came from this specific manufacturer. The whole thing was kind of scary. It does remind everybody that, hey, this internet thing, it breaks sometimes, and it's not necessarily the most stable thing, and that hackers still are idiots. Please don't hack us. Anyway, if you want more information, definitely do some Google searching. We may never actually figure out what happened, but it's over. So go buy some stuff on Amazon and go listen to some Spotify and go on Reddit, because those are all worthwhile endeavors for, the font of all knowledge. Moving on from more serious to less serious news, let's talk a little bit about Marvel stuff. I'm going to go through this really quick because they're basically just headlines. hey, are you excited about the new Jessica Jones series that's coming out? We are, especially since they've just announced that every single episode of the next season of Jessica Jones will be directed by a woman, which is kind of cool. Now, the first season of Jessica Jones already had way more women involved than most TV shows. The first season had, let me get the numbers here. Jessica Jones had a female showrunner. There were female writers and directors. Women made up 1/3 of the directors in the first season, which might not sound like a lot, but that's twice the average for TV shows. Last year, less than 18% of television episodes had female directors, Jessica Jones being one of them. So the fact that this year they've gone out of their way to get all female directors for every single show is kind of cool. On to slightly other Marvel news. Hey, have you wanted some of these awesome Netflix show superheroes or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to show up in the Marvel movies? And you've been told over and over again, it's probably not going to happen. It's still not going to happen. But Kevin Feige actually came out with a pretty good reason, in my opinion. So for a very long time, Marvel in general has been saying that, well, the TV shows and the movies all are an interconnected universe. Don't expect to see people from the TV shows showing up on the movies, and for the most part, vice versa, with a few exceptions. And Feige finally came out with a really good reason. He basically said the people on the TV shows deserve to be introduced into the movies with the same care and concern that, say, Black Panther and Spider-Man got, or Wanda and Pietro, or the Vision and Ultron, and that they deserve more than just a background cameo shot. He is quoted as saying, "I think it's extremely impressive what Netflix has done, and it will be the same answer I always give, which is, it depends on the timing. It all depends on how to do it, because I don't think what anybody wants to do is have such important characters show up for 1 second. Black Panther and Spider-Man and me are the high bar in Civil War, and how you bring in new characters into something. Vision and Ultron, Wanda and Pietro in Ultron. And it takes a lot of screen time, and it takes a lot of work. Infinity War has a lot of people in it already. So it just depends on how we could figure it out." So it's not a no, but I am a little heartened by the fact that they're not going to throw these characters in there for a 2-second cameo. What they want to do is, if they're going to have Luke Cage show up somewhere, he won't just be there to be eye candy for an Easter egg. He will be there, he will be introduced, and he will get a proper part in the show, in the movie. And I kind of think that's the way to do it. I think that's the best way to go about doing it. But, that's just my opinion. And finally, Donald Glover is going to be young Lando Calrissian.
Yes!
Duh. I mean, come on. Really? I know there was some doubt, but is anyone really surprised by this? It's Donald Glover. He's going to be young Lando. That's all for This Week in Geek. I'm Obo Crazy, and I like to end things out on a well, duh moment.
The world is indeed a Lando place. If you have a fact that you want read live and on the air, you can send it to Lauren at obocrazy.com. And while you're at it, go to glibshark.com, full of all the episodes of Late Night Jenga Jam back in the day Buttcast, Modern Glibshark, and of course Dungeons and Dragons and Drunks, where you can, speaking of which, subscribe to Dungeons and Dragons and Drunks, not only via using the RSS feed on the link, but we have an iTunes feed now. So be sure to hop on to whatever service it is, rate us, leave us a review, subscribe. It helps people find the show. And if you like listening to us make fools of ourselves and drunkenly navigate this amazing world that Lauren has created for us, rate us and review us. It'll help.
Yes, please. And it sounds like you guys are happy about the casting of Lando.
Oh, absolutely. Donald Glover. I mean, there was talk for a long time, a couple of years ago, about him being cast as the Miles Morales version of Spider-Man. But Lando is another sort of geek tentpole that I can see it being right up his alley.
Yeah, well, he's a great actor, and really that's my first bar. Is this person a good actor, and do they fit the part? And as I said in the piece, it's kind of a duh. He's a great actor and he fits the part, so why not?
I mean, it seems like there's a lot of cross-branding opportunities here. They could bring back Colt 45 and have Donald Glover do commercials for it. I mean, you can have a good time without Colt 45, but I wouldn't recommend it. Or you know what, Donald, you're busy. I got you. You're focusing on being a serious actor, focusing on Atlanta, focusing on Lando. So maybe let me do you a solid. Let me be the spokesman for Colt 45. I got the sweaters and the swagger for it. I'll do it.
You're going to take this one off his plate? Yeah,
just sort of pinch hitting for Donald Glover, Jack Edithil for Colt 45.
He doesn't have to completely follow in all of the footsteps. And it's been a very long time since you've seen really alcohol commercials like that in general. I mean,
I think they're illegal. I think you can't have there are certain alcohols that you can't have TV commercials for. Well, I say that, but I guess Jack Daniels and Sail Jerry I've seen commercials for.
Yeah, so I mean, and then
it may be a timeline. It may be safe harbor kind of thing.
Yeah.
You may have to be past 10 o'clock at night, or it might be. It might also depend on the kind of alcohol. Beer and hard liquor may have different. Hey,
but audience at home. I see Mila Kunis advertising Jim Beam all the time. Patrick Stewart doing Strongbow, which is more of a cider, granted. But what's her face? Claire Forliani doing those stupid "Be Careful, Angus" commercials for I think Jameson.
No, isn't that all on TV?
Yeah. Oh, TV.
Okay.
Oh, well, you mean in movies? I was talking about strictly TV.
No, I haven't had a cable subscription in forever, and I think the internet has different rules about that kind of thing. So I was wondering, are you seeing these on YouTube? Are you seeing them on Twitch? Are you seeing them on Amazon? Or is this like NBC at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? But hey, it's got to be 5 o'clock somewhere. Why not?
Ideas for a future episode: how to make NBC more interesting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay, this brings up a random question. I don't know if I've ever asked you gentlemen this before, but this is a question I like asking people. When is the earliest you've ever had an alcoholic drink? So you've woken up. I'm not talking about I stayed up all night, so I was drinking 2 o'clock in the morning. You've gone to sleep, you've woken up, and now you are going to have an alcoholic beverage. What's the earliest time that you've done that?
I want to say 9 or 10 a.m.
Do you remember what it was? It was mimosas and stuff, or was
it was like a mimosa. It was it was either a mimosa or a Bloody Mary. I mean, I tend to have those pretty early.
Jenga?
There was a stretch for a little bit of time towards 2008 or 2009 where every now and again in the morning I put a little bit of liquor into my orange juice to get me going. It's not something I'm very proud of, but it's there. So do with it as you will.
For me, it was always on vacation. Like if I was on a cruise or if I was at RTX. I know there have been or RVBTO, even going that far back, there have been some rough mornings where it's
oh yeah. Well, the beer I had for breakfast wasn't bad, so I had one more for dessert.
Little hair of the dog.
Yeah. I mean, I think the time sometimes if there's a half drunken beer lying around, and I'm terrible about this, I would finish it off, but usually when those are lying around, I'm kind of hungover. I'm waking up around 3 or 4 anyway, which is a borderline more respectable hour. But these days, if I am going to have booze during the morning, it's strictly in a brunch capacity.
Yeah, brunch is pretty. To have some early morning booze, but like I said, I like RTX that weekend. A lot of shit goes down, so it's you're gonna have a little booze early.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, even these days, the most drinking that I do is probably either doing Dungeons and Dragons and Drunks with you guys, or if I'm traveling to a convention or something and hanging out with you guys, and I'll drink a little more. Once in a while I'll indulge, but I don't really drink that much anymore.
I will say that one of the heavy Put a little bit of rum. As the day went on, the proportion of rum to coffee started going ever more in rum's favor. And there's a video that our good friend Quarters Nick posted of people playing Riftball, and that's actually the first time I met so that, and I was halfway through the day or so the rum portion was I think like at about half. Coffee was about half rum at that point. And so when you see that video and you see me playing Halo and apologizing to Izzy because I thought I may have just owned her face, but turns out she was my teammate. That's how. And then like later on, they did screenings of some of the fan stuff that we had done, and I think I had an Awesome on Its Own video there. But I was watching it and I was in the back with Manda and Jonesy, and I shared my drink with Manda, and she's like, "Oh, that's just rum. That's rum. That's just rum."
Well,
I'm just having a shot right now.
Yeah, and like Thane Krios said, rum wins. Rum always wins. Or was it entropy? One or the other.
So I will admit that one of the reasons I like asking this question, and I've thought of this question, and this is kind of my backup go-to question if I ever actually would stand up at some kind of convention to ask a question, especially the Rooster Teeth guys, is because the earliest I've ever had an alcoholic beverage after waking up is 8 o'clock in the morning. I had boxed wine. Did I ever tell you guys the story of being on tour and having boxed wine at 8 o'clock in the morning?
Regale us with tales of boxed wine bacchanalia.
Okay. I don't know if I've ever told the story. I'll keep it short. Many years ago, I got to go on a 2-week tour with the Moscow Chamber Orchestra. When you ask, how did I end up on an American tour with the Moscow Chamber Orchestra? The short answer is I knew the right people. They were awesome. It was amazing. During the tour, it was mostly bus to here, there, and everywhere, and then every once in a while get on a plane. And one morning we woke up to get on a bus to go to the airport to get on a plane. And most of the people on the bus spoke mostly Russian, not a lot of English. They sat me next to Stas, the bass player, who spoke the best English. And it is 8 o'clock in the morning, and we are on our way to the airport, and I hear cheering from the front of the bus. And the concertmaster stands up, and he's got his one of the other violinists with him, and they have a box of wine, and they have solo cups, and they're passing out solo cups and filling them with the box wine. And Stas, what's going on? Why are they passing out? Oh, it's the birthday of one of the viola players. We celebrate her birthday. Now 8 o'clock in the morning, so it's a little early to be drinking, and we're heading to the airport. She's born right now, and so we celebrate right now. So who am I to argue with a whole bunch of Russians who want to celebrate the birthday of one of their fellows on a bus going to the airport?
You are no one to argue with that.
Absolutely not. So when they came my way with the box and the solo cups, I got myself a little bit of box wine in a solo cup, and the concertmaster stood at the front of the bus and made what I'm sure is a very lovely little toast to the viola player whose birthday it was. It was all in Russian, so I didn't understand any of it. They said cheers to her, and then everybody downed their wine like it was a shot. And the solo cup that I had, it wasn't half filled. It was a little under half filled, and everyone just downed it. And I'm like, well, here we go. So yeah, I had about a third of a cup of box wine at 8 o'clock in the morning on my way to the airport with a bunch of Russians.
Wow. What does it say about me that I think that, hey, well, if you have to drink at 8 o'clock in the morning, box wine seems to be a pretty responsible choice. That's where my mind goes with that.
I can't say it was my favorite alcoholic experience as far as taste, but I'm not a wine drinker, so what do I know?
And it's the best story by far.
It's like the story makes it, but
yeah.
The experience was amazing. But yeah, I don't know if I would recommend without that whole experience to wrap around it. I would not recommend box wine at 8 o'clock in the morning.
That's a fair point.
It certainly wasn't I was expecting when I woke up that morning.
I mean, I could maybe see White Zinfandel because I feel like that wine was made for boxing.
It was red. I don't remember anything. It was definitely a red wine. In a box.
Might have been a Merlot then.
I am not drinking a Merlot.
I don't know.
So I won't go into details, but I will say that my diet and alcoholic consumption has required some change here recently. And part of that change is I'm focusing a lot more on clear liquors and wine. And I was talking to a friend of ours about wines. She is very knowledgeable about wine. And I was like, well, she recommended a wine called Tanat, which if you've listened to some recent Dungeons and Dragons and Drunks, you've heard me recommend this wine. Well, I wanted to expand, and I wanted to get some ideas about some other reds that I could try, specifically red wine. And we were talking about it, and the subject of a Merlot came up. And we both instantly thought of that fucking line from Sideways, which is not a great movie. But as far as memorable lines go, the I'm not drinking a Merlot just kind of sticks in your head. and thusly, like, I have no reason not to drink Merlot. Like, I'm not, like, I don't have enough experience to like or dislike it, but I just refuse to drink it out of principle because of that line.
So you're just afraid of Paul Giamatti quietly judging you while you sip for your Merlot.
Well, you know what? He played the Rhino for like 2 seconds in that awful Spider-Man movie, so he is in no position to judge anyone.
That's true, and yet I still would not want him silently sitting there judging me.
Oh,
He's
man.
creepy.
Or Thomas Hayden Church. Where's he been the last 10 years?
He is actually on a new show with another person who hasn't done much recently, Sarah Jessica Parker, on HBO called Divorce.
Oh, interesting. Good to see Ned keep him busy.
Yeah, and the only reason I know that is because I've been watching some HBO recently because Westworld is fucking awesome. And just as a warning, last 10-15 minutes of the show, we are going to go into episodes 1 through 3 spoilers for Westworld.
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of those commercials for the exact same reason. And I have to admit, it doesn't look like anything I would be interested in watching.
No, I mean, it's... yeah. For me personally, it hits a little close to home. So I'm just like, I'd rather not bother. I'm good. I'm okay. I don't need to watch it.
Yeah. Although I will admit, half of it could be Sarah Jessica Parker for me. I just don't find her interesting, intriguing, funny, witty. I'm sure she's fine. It's probably just the stuff she's in is not for me, but not interested.
It's funny though, because there's a lot of Sarah Jessica Parker in the air because I don't know what it is. Like, a lot of my female friends, everyone all of them between the ages of 30 and 39 love the movie Hocus Pocus. I've never seen it before, but it's like their go-to Halloween movie. I think even Jill, one of my people I follow on Twitter, changed her name to Amok, which I think is a line from the trailer.
Yes, yeah.
I may have to see this movie. The Witches, I think, is a deeper cut. I like that movie. Who was in that? I think Bette Midler was in it. Or no, it was Angelica Houston was the villainess in that one.
Oh, I did not like The Witches. I thought it was super fucking creepy.
Oh man, I love that movie.
I
saw it as a little
did not
kid.
like it. Yeah, so did I, and I was just like, I just felt like, I don't know. I think it was the mouse transformation that really got me of the kid. That was especially grotesque. So I was just like, no, I'm good. I remember I've seen Hocus Pocus, but it's been a long time. And it was Bette Midler, Kathy Najimy, and Sarah Jessica Parker were the witches in that.
Yeah.
I think I saw it when it first came out, and I have no memory of this movie except I know I've seen it.
It's funny. Like, I was thinking about all these creepy movies that came out. Like Disney is known primarily for, their animation and their kid-friendly stuff. But there was a stretch of time in like the late 70s, early 80s where, and I know this because I watched the stuff like, on VHS and stuff like that. Like Escape to Witch Mountain, where there were kind of movies with this creepy kind of sci-fi vibe to them. Do you guys remember Escape to Witch Mountain?
I remember the remake.
Yeah, or in the original, I think these kids are like supposedly like they're on the run from the government, but really they're aliens or something, and they're trying to get back to the mountain because that's where their dad is, and their dad's an alien or something. I mean, it's been a long time since. I mean, we're talking like 20 plus years since no, more than that, 25 years at least since I've seen it. But there was a time where they were kind of going dark, different places with it.
Well, and a lot of their live action stuff, especially in the 70s and the 80s and even earlier, it had a weird kind of craziness to it. It's Bedknobs and Broomsticks and Herbie the Love Bug and all of that stuff.
Herbie
they're like
was
zany, zany and wacky, and then every once in a while they're a little disturbing.
Yeah. Pete's Dragon. I mean, they may be remaking that now, but like the original Pete's Dragon was one of my favorite movies growing up as a kid.
That's a sad movie.
Yeah, but I think I guess I'm kind of like Eeyore, where it's like I carry that sadness with me, but there's also that amazing rainbow up on that hill where I sit and watch it by myself at the end of the storms, and that's why you sit through the storm the whole time, because you get to see this amazing rainbow come out at the end.
I was too busy watching The Empire Strikes Back over and over and over on VHS. And the first 20 minutes of Jedi, I basically that was my childhood, was or that was my high school years, I should say, is the first Empire Strikes Back and the first 20 minutes of Jedi, just until they get rescued from Jabba's palace, and then that's it. No more of Jedi.
Which wasn't Disney at the time, but is Disney now. So maybe we can retroactively make that retcon that into having always been Disney.
No.
Come on, Superboy Prime. Just got to punch a wall and make it happen. That's the right company. But if he punches hard enough, it'll affect one company over. Speaking of which, you guys hear about the whole AT&T Time Warner deal?
Yeah, I heard about that yesterday. That sounds like it's going to be fucking awful.
Yeah, so like, is antitrust just like dead and hasn't been dead for the past 20 years? It's just like...
Well, clearly. I mean, cable companies can carve out territories and agree not to compete with each other. So totally. I mean, that's on a smaller scale, but this AT&T Time Warner deal, AT&T already bought up Sync. They were already broken up once.
Right.
And then they reformed, and now this is like a Katamari of other stuff. Like they broke the original Katamari, and now it's bigger. It's gotten bigger, and it's absorbing more shit.
Yeah. At the same time, though, like I've read some analysis of it. Some people are seeing it as a sign of desperation on the part of both companies because they're facing such stiff competition from companies like Google and Facebook and the big and Apple and the big like tech giants, right? And where the old media, vis-a-vis cable or even cell phones, you wouldn't think of that as old media, but compared to some of the stuff we have now, it is relatively older. It's interesting to see that they feel like they need to do this in order to stay competitive with companies like Verizon or the other ones. I'm not really happy about what this will mean for content. I remember in the 2000s, remember when AOL bought Time Warner like almost like 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
One of the best things to ever come out of that was Marvel, before they got bought out by Disney, was competing with DC, which of course is a Time Warner subsidiary. So the editor-in-chief and publisher of Marvel, Joe Quesada and a guy named Bill Jemas, respectively, were always good about like needling DC with this quote-unquote friendly rivalry. So they started calling DC Comics AOL Comics. And, the DC people did not like that at all. So now I guess we'll call them AT&T Comics.
Yeah, I guess that's how they're getting away with it not being a conglomerate, monopoly thing, is because it's companies that ostensibly one is buying out another and they don't directly compete in a lot of ways. It's,
right.
So I guess that's how they're getting around
vertical integration as opposed to horizontal. I'm not sure I'm using the right term there, but basically meaning that because they're not buying a competitor, they're not buying Time Warner Cable, which is a completely different company. It's just they're looking to get more content to push to people. Although, if it means that AT&T customers get to stream like free Time Warner Brothers films to their movies, I mean that's kind of steps on net neutrality a little bit too. But I mean, well, if it's a special service, not necessarily.
I don't know that it would necessarily like overtly trounce on neutrality. It shouldn't.
Right. If it's like an extra
there's
feature.
enough people watching this to where as soon as something like that happens, the flags are going to go up and they'll start being hearings. And I don't think either company wants that right now. They want this deal to happen so that means that they have to abide by net neutrality. Oh God, that's so terrible. Then that's something that they're going to do. Because if it is, like you said, desperation, then they're really going to want that this deal to close.
And I don't think
as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I don't think if deals are going to be offered to customers, I think it's going to be more like the Amazon Prime, Twitch Prime thing, in where they're going to stay away from being able to offer faster or slower services because that's been key buzzwords for net neutrality. But they could certainly be like, hey, if you're a Time Warner cable subscriber and you have a cell phone plan with AT&T, you'll get discounts, like monetary discounts for.
Well, except that, Time Warner Cable is a whole different thing. Like there's Time Warner, the entertainment company, and then Time Warner Cable is a separate thing. So AT&T made it clear that they're actually not trying to acquire Time Warner Cable.
Oh, it's Time Warner.
It's just Time Warner, the actual entertainment company. Yeah. So it's like that makes it the case against them, trying to consolidate them. But at some point, 10 years from now, are we looking at this deal the way, like if someone told you, hey, Kodak is going to buy Jostens Ring Company, like two companies that are so, or who makes photo albums anymore? I don't know.
No idea. I have no idea.
Or like a typewriter company buying a word processor company. Like that's the way it looked at. I think it'll be looked at in 10, 15 years from now. Or maybe not, because this is still big money.
And if these companies are smart, they'll change with the times. They will continue, AT&T managed to, they still do landline stuff, but they've managed to get into the cell phone market. And for a very long time, you couldn't have an iPhone unless you had a plan through AT&T. So they've still managed to keep fairly relevant these days. So I wouldn't count them as too desperate.
That's a fair point. I mean, maybe they're going to maintain a Microsoft level of relevance going forward. And that's still pretty relevant. If you ask anybody who works in an office whether Microsoft is important or not.
I did have for a very long time an AT&T webmail address. That was my email address from, I want to say, when I was in high school, through college, and well into graduate school, and when I graduated, because it was free, it was easy, and at the time it was one of those, this is my email address and it's like my phone number. I want to keep it the same so people can contact me. And it wasn't until relatively recently in my life that I bought a domain and got myself my own email address and gave that up. So AT&T, I still remember having that webmail at att.net address.
Oh yeah, I was an AT&T customer for over 10 years. Like my first cell phone was through AT&T, then they became Singular, and then right around the time I got my iPhone, they became AT&T again.
Yeah.
And I only switched last year because I was grandfathered into that, unlimited data, which AT&T doesn't offer anymore. But I wanted to add my wife to my plan because she had previously been on, either her brother's plan or her parent's plan, something like that. And I wanted to get her on my plan, and there's no way to do that and maintain unlimited data with AT&T. So I just made the jump to Sprint. And unlimited data is, they throttle it after a while, but I do kind of miss not being able to do like web searches and be on the phone at the same time. But it's not often that I'm on the phone anymore. It's like it's all text these days, right? Like I'll talk to my wife on the way home, and every now and again someone will call. But for the most part, primary driver communication is text.
Yeah, that's most of the time, except on Thursdays, where actually I spend most of my on the phone time in the car, and that's mostly Thursdays when Luke and I get in the car to drive to our friend's house to go play D&D with my home game. because of the traffic and the time that we leave, it can often take like 30 to 40 minutes to get there, even though it's on the way home. It's really only about a 20-minute drive. And that has become the time and where I connect my phone via Bluetooth to my car and I call my parents and we chat.
Yes, calling your parents ever. I mean, and there's a reason for you to do it. Like I feel I'm really bad about this. When I moved out, like, so they only live 45 minutes away, and I see them at church. But like, Mom, Dad, if you're listening, sorry I don't call home more often. I will try and do better about job of that.
Mom, Dad, if you're listening, please stop listening.
Mom, Dad, if you're listening, I love you. I'll talk to you on Thursday.
Yes.
Yeah, I actually don't remember the moment that that became a thing. It's relatively recent, like in the last couple of months. And it was one of those like, I was pretty good about calling my parents once every week, every other week kind of thing. Because yeah, they live on the opposite side of the country from me. And if I don't call and get updates, all of a sudden I find out someone's in the hospital or this happened, some major life event happens and I find out about it like 3 weeks later. So I try to be good about calling, and that just became a super convenient thing. And so now it's once a week, Thursdays, on my way to D&D. I give him a call. It gives it just enough time to chat. And eventually Dad starts to tell stories about his dog. And we get a couple of good stories, and then it's time for me to get out of the car, which is good because then he just wants to tell all the stories. And I love my dad and I love his dog, but oh my God, there's only so many stories I can hear about his dog.
It's
like a small child.
Intriguing spin-off idea. We may have to revisit this later on.
Dad and his dog?
Yeah, just stories of dads and their dogs.
I mean, they're the kind of stories that like I'm vaguely interested in because it's my dad and it's my essentially brother at this point, but not really any stories that I would like, let me regale you with the story of, dad taking dog to training classes because he's trying to get him to be a therapy dog, or, the funny things they did during Halloween, or the interesting things that happened with deer. Like, I find them fun because it's my family, but I definitely don't think it'd be something like, a new segment on Glib Shark where I relay stories about my dad and his dog.
The story of how the dog got into the box wine.
A boy and his dog.
Yeah, and his box wine.
And his box wine. No, my dad has a little more respect than that. He would at least feed. My parents have become wine snob-ish. Like, they're not really snobs because they're super happy if they can find a bottle of wine that they like that's inexpensive. But they've certainly developed a much more cultured taste.
So a nice Australian Shiraz.
They actually got super happy with some of the wines on the West Coast in Washington. They were really impressed. But yeah, I mean, they've mentioned Australian wines. They try all sorts of random shit. So yeah, if the dog was to ever get into alcohol, and he shouldn't because dogs shouldn't drink, never let your dog drink and drive. He'd probably get drunk on a pretty nice bottle of wine.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of my beagle. Like, this is before I was in the picture. Like, every now and again, like drinking beer. Apparently, there are beers that he likes and beers that he doesn't. He won't touch the hard stuff. Good dog. But I always joke that if beagles tend to be a little bit slightly longer lived breed, like the life expectancy is anywhere from like 12 to like 17 years. So on the off chance that we take good care of Ricky and he lives to 21, I've decided that he deserves it. And once he's of age, he deserves a drink.
Well, there you go. Yeah. I don't think my dad is intentionally feeding the dog wine anytime soon. Although I'm certain there are times in where he wishes he could get the dog drunk. My mom especially wishes she could get the dog drunk. I mean, it's a husky. They are demanding animals.
Yeah, I mean, we have stairs now, so I don't know how good a combination stairs plus alcohol plus a beagle would be. I'm guessing not so great. So
listen, stairs plus alcohol plus me are a bad combination. Throw a dog into the mix. That's a recipe, especially a dog with such a low center of gravity.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah,
Drunk dog.
Drunk dog. Tweet your drunk dog stories at Glib Shark. Use the hashtag drunk dog. If we get
I
a
want to
story,
just
I'll be so
create
happy.
that Twitter handle now.
What, drunk dog?
Yeah, I just want to create a drunk dog Twitter and just have it be one of those one-off Twitters, and where every once in a while I just tweet as a drunk dog.
Oh, I'd follow that account.
You'd follow it for about 5 days, which is about how long I would be interested in it, and then it would drop off.
Speaking of dropped off, Jack Chick is dead. Seamless. Just amazing.
Yeah.
Podcast professional.
I tweeted about that yesterday, and it's one of those weird things where you don't want to like revel in someone's death.
Right.
At the same time, there are people who die, and the world is a better place now that they're gone. And Jack Chick was definitely one of those people where the world is going to be a better place now. For those who don't know, Jack Chick is basically a super religious nut job that got the idea that in order to spread his beliefs, he was going to create comics based on the ills of society. He had one about pot and drugs, where the famous frame from that is like kids dancing and say, "Let's do pot," and then the next guy says, "And deny Christ."
I don't mean to laugh. But
Which the few times that I've partaken, I definitely did not do that. That was not a thing.
Yeah, and just how his twisted version of what Christianity was, which included, any kind of respect for anyone who is, Jewish or Muslim or Catholic, which he didn't see as Christian. I think one of his tracks, that's what they called his little comic like books or whatever, was called Death Cookie. And it was about how the concept of communion was just sort of like satanic. And so not a big Jack Chick fan, as you can imagine.
But the reason why I brought him up, and I'm not sure if it's going to make it into the episode, but we recorded Dungeons, Dragons, and Drunks last night. And that was when I found out that Jack Shit. That's actually a better name. That Jack Chick. Damn it, I did it again. Jack Chick had died. By far, at least for me, his most famous comic was something called Dark Dungeons. And it tells a story of, and this is actually kind of progressive, oddly enough, a girl going and playing Dungeons and Dragons with a group that also included like 3 other girls. I think the group was actually mostly girls, which if you're going to give Jack Chick credit for anything, it's for saying, hey, girls can play D&D too. But anyway, the point is that this girl starts playing D&D and then gets into the occult and then actually starts casting spells, but then is brought back to the light after one of her friends commits suicide because her character died.
Because that's totally how Dungeons and Dragons works.
How it works is that when your character dies, it's dead and gone forever. There's no such thing as resurrection or reincarnation or any number of ways you could bring back a level 9 character. But hey, who are we to nitpick at pedantic little details?
Yeah, never mind the suicide pact that I signed at the beginning of doing Dungeons and Dragons and Drunks.
Yeah, it's a good thing Travancore hasn't died yet. I mean, that's why I always get nervous when Jonathan the Magic Muscular goes down. I'm like, yeah, that's one more saving throw. I better go get the razor.
Spoiler alert, if Shadow dies and stays dead, I only lose the use of my legs.
Guys, this got dark very fast, and I'm only going to throw level 1 goblins at you for the rest of my life.
But that's the ridiculousness that's in these things. And I'm going to be quite frank right now. I did not have a very high opinion of Dungeons and Dragons when I was first introduced. I remember I picked up like the Red Box starter set like ages ago when I was a kid. We got it from a garage sale. Well, I didn't really understand the game. Like, I was a pretty bright kid, but Dungeons and Dragons kind of confounded me because it was like I was used to structure and rules when I learned a game. And even though there were rules, it kind of seemed you could do anything, and so I really didn't see the point. So I kind of fell out of it. And when I was reintroduced in like high school and at the beginning of college, I didn't have a very high opinion of it. It was to me, people pretending to be elves and other shit, and I was just like not interested. I remember there was actually a big game that was going on with my friends in our dorm, and I refused to participate because I was like, no, I don't want to pretend to be a fucking elf. That's not something that I'm interested in. It wasn't until it was spun sort of a different way, and it's one of the reasons why Jonathan the Magic Muscular is kind of built the way he is, because I play Dungeons and Dragons very much like a tactical miniature game versus a role-playing game. That's just my style, and that's what got me into the game. And since then, I've come to appreciate a lot of the other like storytelling elements, but that was where I started. And I'll be honest, if I had read that Dark Dungeons comic early enough, it would have influenced me, and that's scary considering what I do now. So that influence, the fact that that's gone, is a good thing.
Yep. My first experience with the Chick track was something I found. Like, I read it, and it was called Allah Has No Son. And it was sort of an argument against Islam. Basically saying like, oh, they claim to be an Abrahamic religion, but they're not even really. And it was completely fraudulent. But I was like 10 when I read it. So my sister found it. And then she sat me down and kind of explained to me what Islam actually was. And that was super cool of her. I mean, she was studying, I think, at Temple at the time, or maybe she was thinking about it. I think, 14, trying to do the math here. But that's dangerous. Like, they get to it's designed largely to indoctrinate children, which I think is insidious. I mean, I love like comics and cartoons and sequential art in general. One of the founding tenets of this broadcast was me talking to web comics artists and comic book art authors that I liked. And to see somebody take that art form and turn it to something so sinister, so devious, it made me really angry. So, Jonathan, I'm with you. I'm not going to celebrate anyone's death necessarily, but definitely I think now that he is gone, it's time for these discredited ideas to sort of fall to the wayside.
And as someone who hadn't heard about this guy until literally a day ago, I can say that it's awesome because Hearthstone. Sorry, Luke is playing Hearthstone. The only good thing that has come out of this is I've now learned a new word, which is dispensationalism. Because I had to look up some stuff about who this guy was and what the hell is he doing, and I saw a word that I didn't know. And so now I know all about dispensationalism, which is kind of a crazy religious thing. I wouldn't recommend it, but hey, new words.
Yep. This has been the Vocabulary Hour with Jonathan, Jack, and Lauren.
I think since last week was sort of I believe a shorter episode. We'll go a little bit long tonight if that's okay with you guys, because I feel like we have more to talk about just in general before we get to Westworld.
I can go a little bit longer, but literally right after this, we're watching that next episode of Westworld. So I don't want to tarry too long.
Right, we'll keep the spoiler cast pretty short, but there are a couple of things that I wanted to go over. One of which was the fact that if you've been watching the stream, you have noticed that I have been playing Civilization 6, and that came out while I was on vacation. So I'll talk briefly about my vacation, and then I'll talk about Civ 6, because I got to go to Albuquerque, New Mexico this last weekend.
Ooh.
Wow.
And now I want to sing Weird Al Yankovic. In Albuquerque.
Yeah, it was fun. It was so. I was originally supposed to go to Tulsa this last weekend to meet up with a bunch of people, some friends from the internet, and we're going to get together in Tulsa and drink beer and do all that stuff. Well, a lot of stuff happened, and the trip fell through. So I was like, well, I mean, I had Friday off. Why don't we go to Albuquerque? Because I'd never been, and Lisa had never been to New Mexico, so we decided to go, and it was a fucking blast.
Nice. Did you do anything in specific?
Yes, we kind of branded it as a Pokemon Go trip, oddly enough. So we got to our hotel, and then we went out to dinner at a really great like Mexican seafood restaurant that was right next to our hotel, and there was a Pokestop like right there. So immediately we started getting tons of Pokemon. we then went to the University of New Mexico campus and walked around there. I got to say, that is a really nice campus. It is very walkable. It was dark, but it was very safe feeling. There were tons of people around, tons of students. The auditorium there is where a lot of the shows, like traveling companies of musicals. So the Lion King was there that night, which made parking a little hairy, but ultimately it wasn't bad. And then the next day we went to the Petroglyphs Natural Monument, and then we went to lunch at a place called Sadie's, which was only okay. We also took a picture at Walter White's house on Breaking Bad. We found it, and then we drove past, and there's a very, very obvious, this is private property, no intruders or no trespassers. So all we did was we stayed in the car and kind of slowly drive by while I took a picture, and then we went to the zoo, which is part of like the big Albuquerque like biopark, which is like the combined zoo, aquarium, and botanical gardens. We didn't get to do the aquarium or botanical gardens, but we did spend a ton of time at the zoo, and again, just tons and tons of Pokemon. Like, it was a really, really lucrative weekend, and we even held the gym that was right near the Petroglyphs National Monument. There's like 3 trails, and we went on the Boco Negro one, and that gym we held until just a few minutes ago.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And they weren't hard trails, definitely not like the hike that I went on a few weeks ago, but some of them were pretty uphill, and it was well worth it. Like, just standing among this history, this written account of the Native Americans that lived around there. It was awe-inspiring. It was really, really cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. That's amazing. Now, New Mexico is on the list of 20 states I haven't been to yet, so definitely very high on my list.
Yeah, and we went to their Old Town district, which is kind of like their, hey, tons of shopping and stuff. We went to a steakhouse called High Noon, and Jack, I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, I, and Izzy went to the Max Wine Dive bar right near the convention center in Austin. Do you remember the steak that I had, the Wagyu beef?
I thought it was, that sounds right. Yeah, I remember.
I remember you and Izzy's reaction. It was
a really good steak.
Oh man, Izzy had an especially exaggerated reaction.
Yes, she did.
And it was we were already drunk, so there was that. This steakhouse had a portion of Wagyu beef, and it was really, really, really good. I loved it. It was such a great trip, though.
Now I want some beef.
I kind of always want beef. Beef.
Our sound producer is Jonathan Wagyu Beef Stir.
Well, hold on. We'll sign off once we're done with Westworld here.
Oh yeah, well, I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen anything yet. I'm looking forward to hearing what your first impressions are.
Well, I will say, non-spoilery before, and in streamers audience, we are about to get into spoilers for episodes 1, 2, and 3 of the new HBO series Westworld. If you are still watching and haven't, or on the fence about watching, all I can say is watch it, come back and listen to this, because we're going to have some thoughts, but it is an excellent show.
Well, there you go. So you may have heard some words at the beginning of the show. That's Bob Ball. He's a voice actor, and he does the opening for us. And you may have heard some music, and that ditty was done by Linnea Boyev. Thank you so much to both of you. And on behalf of Jonathan, Lauren, and the entire Glib Shark staff, this is Jack Edithle saying good night, good health, and stay Wagyu, my friends.
Beef.
Cool.
All right. Spoiler cast time.
All right. Yay! I'm going to drop off so I don't hear anything. I want to watch this show. Take care, guys.
Yes.
All right.
Have a good one.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right.
Oh, my God.
All right. So I'm just going to drop what is probably the biggest spoiler hole, because it's been something that Luke and I have discussed for the first couple of episodes, and he's more convinced about it than I am. Who do you think is a host that is being passed off as a human?
So Lisa thinks that Bernard is the one that's the host. I mean, because
Luke thinks the same thing.
Yeah, well, I I kind of figured that there were hosts that were implanted in the company to kind of as a test and stuff like that. I actually think I think it's the well, I did think it was the corporate chick. My opinion has changed on that. I don't think it's her anymore. I'm kind of leaning towards the Bernard because that makes the interactions he's had with Dolores a lot more interesting when he is clearly in those conversations able to influence her, like, wait, stop, analysis. What did you mean by that? Or he's able, okay, stop doing the accent. He's able to wield an enormous amount of power over Dolores. How interesting would that power be if he were also a host? Is kind of what I think.
Okay. With that in mind, do you think, let's say Bernard is a host, do you think he knows he is?
No. I think that's the point. If there are embedded hosts, then they have no conscious awareness that they are a host. They think they're real people. It's very much like the Cylon sleeper agents from Battlestar, like what Boomer was. They may have a switch, like maybe if the right phrase word along with something else, because like a phrase word I don't think would be enough to kind of turn him on. That because like who knows what could accidentally be said around him, especially among other actual humans. But I think there's an additional trigger that maybe could set him off. Another possibility might be, I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. Anthony Hopkins. I think he'd be a great choice for a host.
He'd be he would definitely be an interesting choice. So, as I said, Luke and I have discussed this quite a bit. I don't know if at 3 episodes in, I don't know if I think any of the people who are human are actually hosts, and either secretly or not even knowing. I'm not yet convinced that is a possibility. I'm not discounting it, because there's a ton we do not know yet. This show, for all that it fails to explain anything, and for all that whole scenes go by that I'm like, I have no idea what the fuck just happened, and yet I am intrigued. I think we know enough about the hosts and their history and the pains that this company has taken to making them as lifelike as possible. And yet still there are these issues because technology isn't perfect. I think that it might be nigh on impossible for there to be a host in and amongst the humans, whether knowingly or unknowingly, as thinking it's a host or thinking it's a human. I could be wrong. We might be finding out some stuff that we don't know, but I feel like a host that is, if Bernard, say, was a host, he would have to be such a specialized piece of machinery with a completely different type of programming. One that would, like you said, he'd have to have a very specialized trigger to make him, essentially to be able to influence him. I would have to think he would have to have no triggers. He would have to be a completely autonomous, sentient being, robot of whatever kind, because there's too much of a chance in a facility that has that basically all your computer programming is taking place verbally, where he could easily overhear commands happening all the time. I think I don't know. I think we would have seen something happen, but who knows? But that's been kind of one of the big questions. One of the other things that we've had a lot of fun talking about is just the absolute morality issues that have been coming up already with the people who've been visiting the park and what they are expected to do, what the company totally doesn't even bat an eye at them doing, what kind of ramifications this can have on people. Like, at one point, one of the characters literally just offhanded comment says, People come here to rape and pillage. And they do. They show up, and on a regular basis, we see humans who are just gleefully raping, pillaging, murdering, destroying. And yeah, there's on the one hand that these are not real, quote unquote, but on the other, these are incredibly lifelike simulations, and you're immersed in this world for days, if not, I think they said they're 2-week stints. That's got to have a psychological impact.
Yeah, like someone asked me, would you go to Westworld? Like, if you had the means and you could, like, the decision was all of a sudden, do you go or not go? I don't know that I would go. Like, well, okay, it's easy to say from this side of the viewing port, because I know what happens to people. I see how it influences otherwise, quote unquote, good people to do really terrible. And it doesn't really matter that these are artificial beings. I mean, they are, what you do sort of reflects who you are. Like in any game, like if you play GTA 5 as an asshole, just killing everyone, chances are you're an asshole. I mean, as escapist as it is, you tend to play games how you are. And I've noticed that when I play Mass Effect, I tend to stick with the Paragon side. Yes, there are a couple times where I'll do like a renegade interjection, where I'll shoot a guy, or I'll shoot something off, or I'll punch someone. And then there are times I don't, when like a really popular renegade interjection was to punch that reporter. And I refused because it's on camera. So that's fucking stupid if you do. And also, she's a woman. And I mean, man or woman, it's bad to punch people. But in my mind, I've just refused to punch a lady. So it's like, yeah, that's not something that I would do. And I very much think that that Westworld has that.
Yeah. I would like to think if I had the means to go, I do want to go. Like, I'm fascinated by that kind of total immersion. I would like to think that, because I'm the same way. If I play an RPG, when I play Dungeons and Dragons, when I've played Oblivion and Skyrim and Mass Effect and all those, I play as the hero. My power fantasy is as the hero of the story. And I tend to be the goody two-shoes hero who wants to save everybody and do all the right things and make all the right decisions. And I would like to think in that situation, especially knowing it's a game, and we've already had characters point out don't make eye contact with that guy because then he's going to want to just, drag you into the side quest, and I don't want to do the side quest, and, having gamer reactions to what this is, which is, it should be a game, that I would be the person trying to save everybody and be the white hat. But you know what? You never know. And even in all of those games, and where I've played through is the paragon of everything, a couple of those games I then went back and created a second character to at least play through some of the game on the other side. Oblivion, I played an entire second playthrough as an assassin character because I wanted to see what the Dark Brotherhood storyline was. So I can't discount the idea that I would make some decisions knowing that there are no consequences.
My favorite character so far, or I guess not character, but guest that we've seen, was that one chick that was running around with Teddy, where she stayed with him through the fight with Wyatt's men, where they were showing up and being all creepy. The other guests ran, some of the hosts ran, and she stayed by Teddy's side and he,
until the bitter end.
Yeah, he had to say, look, I am the only one left. You have to get away. And obviously, well, not obviously, we don't, like, they say, yeah, guests can't get hurt. But in this storyline, I don't know. Like, this storyline that Anthony Hopkins is making with these fucking creepy guys and this Wyatt, like, this seems like a catalyst to an accident. And I think people who are fans of the movie, who are watching this show, know, and actually, I guess just about anyone who's savvy about these kinds of shows know that that's coming. Like that is going to be a major event where like everything quote unquote changes is when a host kills a guest. And so it's kind of like Chekhov's host killing guest. It's like it's there and we know that is going to be fired, but we're just waiting for when.
And it's not even obliquely there. It's one of the first things you hear someone say is there hasn't been an accident in this park in, what'd they say, 30 years? Like that's one of the first things you hear in the underground complex. And yeah, that scene with her, what makes that much more insidious is we had just had a scene with the guy and the girl who are tracking down the runaway, and they come across the cowboys who are stuck in the infinite loop by the fireplace or by the campfire. And they drop a very important piece of information, which is there is only one character in this whole posse that is allowed to use a bladed weapon, that's allowed to use the axe. And because that one character had this issue happen, he won't pick up the axe. Because he won't pick up the axe and no one else can, no one will go chop firewood and the story can't continue. And so they're stuck there. What is interesting about that is they have to designate characters, hosts, as being able to use axes, knives, bladed instruments, because unlike a gun that they've obviously retrofitted to have, different consequences depending on who it's pointed at, a blade, really, you can't do that. A knife is a knife is a knife is a knife. And if you stab a host or if you stab a player, it's going to have the same consequences. So the fact that at the end, these creepy cultist people all had melee weapons, if I remember correctly.
I think so. I don't remember specifically, but that does sound familiar.
I know at least most of them, if not all of them, had what looked like knives and machetes and stuff, which means one of two things. One, those are all players, which is creepy. Or two, those are all hosts who've been authorized to use bladed weapons. And now you're relying on the programming of the host to avoid accidents, and not just the programming of the host and the programming of the gun or the actual thing. And I think we might have seen not just, as you referenced, Chekhov's bladed weapon, but we've seen how it's going to happen.
Yeah. And that's when I was talking vaguely about Westworld and just saying how good of a show it was, I mentioned like there were all these little plot lines that are really interesting and it wasn't too much. And we're starting to see some of those come to fruition, like Bernard's interest in Dolores. And Dolores herself, just essentially, like we were talking about, she is probably the first host who is clearly not authorized to use weapons, use a weapon. And that's pretty momentous. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes and how that affects other hosts, because she's clearly been able to have an effect on other hosts with these violent desires have violent ends, or whatever it was from Roman.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. And I can't wait to talk about it more next week.
Yeah. And goddamn, is the acting overall really good? And Anthony Hopkins.
God.
Anthony.
Okay, so actually, there's a couple of things I wanted to say
and
about
Ed Harris.
Ed Harris is amazing.
Fucking Ed Harris.
Anthony Hopkins has allowed us some very, very interesting insights into this whole thing. And it started when, in the cold storage area, we were talking to that older host. The guy who played that host was amazing because he was doing the very robotic movements. And I'm making robotic movements even though no one can fucking see me. But the way he did it was perfect because it looked like a very lifelike but also very animatronic Disney character. And that was brilliant. And then the other moment I really loved was when you went into Anthony Hopkins' office, when he went to talk about Bernard. Oh my God, that was the fucking creepiest office I've ever seen, with all the heads and all the faces, and then the host piano player. Goddamn, Anthony Hopkins, why you got to be creepy, man? Why you got to be creepy?
Because he's Willy Wonka, and he's a little bit of Hammond from Jurassic Park, and he's every eccentric, brilliant, slightly crazy, millionaire, billionaire building a thing. It's perfect. And that talk he had with the host version of himself as a child, I mean, that whole discussion was another one of those conversations, and where I feel like that was such an intense, interesting, fascinating, deep conversation. But oh fuck, I'm not sure if I really understood what was going on. Was when he was talking with the kid version of himself, but then also that discussion he had with Bernard. There was a story in the middle about this partner of his, but a lot of that discussion had depth to it that I'm not sure if we as audience members truly understand, at least yet, and took a very sudden manipulative turn that, like, I literally paused the show when the scene changed, and I was just like, I need to unpack that conversation, because that was deep and weird. That whole thing was deep and weird. Yeah. Oh my God. And with that, we should stop, because I'm going to go watch the next episode.
Yes. And for those of you who stuck around, thank you so much for sticking with us. We love doing things, and I love that we now have a show that is worthy of conversation after the fact. I mean, you could say that about Walking Dead, and if you haven't seen Walking Dead, yes, something happened in the season premiere, but we won't go into that because this is not Walking Dead spoilers. But yeah, shit happened. And but again, Westworld, like, I would have not pegged this as something that would be this interesting. I would have pegged it. I would have considered it yet another remake schlock, but it hasn't been. It's very much in the vein of Battlestar Galactica, where they took this property that was kind of okay, but also a little cheesy, and then has turned it into something which has so far been very meaningful.
Yeah, definitely.
It's made you think a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not even halfway through the season, so things can change. But these first couple of episodes have already been well worth it. So I'm excited.
Yeah. But anyway, again, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next week with Jack and everyone else, and maybe more Civ, maybe something else. We'll see. See you soon.